The signal came from the edge of known space, weak and broken like a voice, calling out from the bottom of a deep hole. The Galactic Council's long-range scanners picked it up on a quiet Tuesday morning. Not that the Council measured time in Tuesdays, but the human translators on their staff had started using the word, and it had stuck. It was a ship. Not a big one, not a fleet, just a single vessel drifting at low speed through the outer ring of the Valora system, which sat squarely inside Galactic Council-controlled space. The ship was human-made. Every scanner confirmed it, the hull design, the engine signature, the faint electromagnetic noise it gave off, all of it matched the profile of a United Nations Space Command warship. What nobody could explain was what it was doing there. The nearest human colony was 42 light-years away. The nearest human outpost of any kind was 38 light-years away. There was no trade route through the Valora system, no diplomatic station, no reason for a human ship, let alone a warship, to be drifting through that particular stretch of space. High Arbiter Solik of the Galactic Council was the first senior official to see the full report. He read it twice, then called for his advisors. "Is it broadcasting?" he asked. "A distress beacon," said Coordinator Foss, a tall, gray-skinned Venari who managed the Council's communication systems. "Old format, low power. It has been broadcasting for at least 18 hours before we detected it. Crew unknown. The ship is not responding to hails. All external lights are dark. Heat signatures from the interior suggests life support is active, but we cannot confirm crew numbers from this distance." Solik leaned back in his chair and looked at the holographic image of the ship floating above his desk. It was a lean gray vessel, about 300 m long. Its hull showed damage, long scoring marks along the port side section of the rear plating buckled inward. One of the secondary engine pods, clearly dead and cold. Whatever had happened to it, it had not been gentle. "A damaged human warship," he said, slowly broadcasting a distress signal in the middle of our space with no explanation for how it got here. "That is correct," said Vass. "And we have heard nothing from Earth. No communication, no notification, no request for passage. Nothing. Earth's diplomatic office has not contacted us in 11 days, and the last contact was routine." Solik was quiet for a moment. He had dealt with humans before. They were a young species, barely 2 centuries into interstellar travel, and they had a habit of doing things in ways that surprised everyone, including themselves. They were smaller than most Council species, shorter-lived, and yet they moved through the galaxy with a kind of restless energy that older species found either admirable or exhausting, depending on the day. But this was different. A lone warship, damaged and silent, the middle of Council space. This was not restless energy. This was a problem. "Send a patrol vessel," Solik said. "Standard approach. Hail them on all frequencies. If there is no response in 2 hours, prepare a boarding team." The patrol vessel, a sleek Council ship called the Measured Voice, reached the human warship 4 hours later. Its commander, a Venari named Ress, had run the approach by the book, slow and visible, lights on, broadcasting peaceful intentions on every channel the humans used. The human ship did not respond. It just drifted, slow and quiet, turning slightly in the current of the systems. Solar wind. Up close, the damage was worse than they scans had suggested. The port side scoring ran the full length of the hull, deep enough in places to expose inner plating. The buckled rear section looked like something enormous had hit it from behind. There were dark stains on the hull. One of the airlock doors, burn marks, the kind left by energy weapons. This ship was in a fight, Rest said. Quietly, recent, asked her tactical officer. The metal around the damage is still slightly warm, a day, maybe two. She hailed the ship again, nothing. Life signs, faint, at least one. Possibly more, deep inside the ship. Near what our records say is the command section. Rest thought about this, one life sign. A ship that had clearly been in a battle that had crossed dozens of light years into council space. That had been quietly broadcasting distress signal for nearly a full day, without anyone coming to answer it. The humans had sent no rescue. Earth had said nothing. It felt wrong in a way she could not name, but her orders were clear. If there was life aboard, she was to render assistance. The Council had treaties with humanity, and those treaties required it. Prepare the boarding team, she said. It took another hour to cut through the outer airlock, the human ship's docking. Systems were offline, and the manual override required them to burn through the seal with a cutting torch. The boarding team of 6 moved inside in full environmental suits, weapons holstered but visible. The interior of the ship was dim, lit only by emergency strips along the floor. The air was breathable, just barely, and cold enough that their breath fogged in front of their helmets. Most of the corridors were empty. Panels on the walls blinked with error messages in a language 3 of the 6 boarding team members could not read. They found her in the command room. She was sitting in the captain's chair, which was positioned at the center of a circular room lined with dark screens and dead consoles. She was human, female by appearance, with short dark hair and a face that was bruised on one side and cut above the left eye. She was wearing a flight suit with the markings of a UNSC commander. Her left arm was held across her body in a way that suggested it was injured. On the console in front of her, 3 empty cups sat in a neat line. She looked at them when they entered. She did not look afraid. She did not look relieved. She looked at them the way a person looks at someone who has just walked into a room where they were already in the middle of something. And she said, in a voice that was calm and a little tired, "Who authorized the breach of my airlock?" The boarding team leader, a young Venari named Tail, had prepared for several possibilities. He had prepared for a terrified survivor. He had prepared for a dying crew member in need of urgent help. He had prepared for silence, confusion, panic. He had not prepared for this. "We are Council Patrol," he said in halting but serviceable human English. "We detected your distress signal. We are here to render assistance." The woman looked at him for a long moment, then she looked at the others behind him, then she looked back at him. "I see," she said. She did not say thank you. She did not ask for a doctor, though she clearly needed one. She did not ask where she was or how long she had been drifting or whether help was coming. She said, "I'm going to need you to not touch anything on this ship." Tail did not know what to do with that. He looked back at his team. They looked back at him. Behind them, through the hole they had just cut through, the cold stars of the valorous system burned on in silence, and the distress beacon that had been broadcasting for nearly a day went quiet. Nobody noticed that it had stopped. Her name was Commander Yeva Astrova, and she had been sitting in that chair for 22 hours. She had eaten the last of her rations 9 hours ago. She had drunk the last of her coffee. Real coffee, from a bag she kept in the emergency cabinet for exactly the kind of situations where everything had gone sideways 6 hours ago. Her left arm had a hairline fracture. Somewhere near the elbow, she was fairly sure, though the med scanner had stopped working, along with most of the ship's other systems, so she was going on the way it felt, which was bad. She had not slept. This was not because she was too worried to sleep. Yeva Astrova had slept in worse situations than this. She had slept in a cockpit while her co-pilot ran emergency repairs. She had slept on the floor of a shuttle that was depressurizing slowly. She had learned a long time ago that exhaustion was the enemy of good decisions, and that a person who could sleep under pressure was a person who could think clearly when they woke up. She had not slept because she was waiting. The Vreth had been following her for 6 days. The Vreth were not a species that the Galactic Council talked about much at formal meetings. They were not members. They were not interested in diplomacy or trade or any of the things that formal meetings were about. They were interested in ships, specifically in taking them, stripping them, and selling the pieces. For the last 3 years, they had been working the outer edges of human colonial space, hitting cargo haulers and small transport vessels, always staying just far enough outside the range where a full UNSC response would be fast enough to matter. They had gotten bolder lately. Yeva's mission, officially listed in the UNSC's records as a navigational survey run, was to change that. The enduring resolve had been modified. Extra power routed to the sensors. The distress beacon reprogrammed to broadcast on the frequencies the Wraith used to track targets. The hull damage was real, done by engineers with a very specific brief. Make it look like this ship has been once and is running. Make it look like something worth chasing. It had worked better than expected. The Wraith had taken the bait within 18 hours. She had led them very slowly, very carefully, on a long curving path that ended here, in the valorous system, deep inside Council space, where her backup was supposed to be waiting. Her backup was not there. She had been waiting for 22 hours when the Council patrol ship appeared, and for about 30 seconds she had allowed herself to feel something like relief. Then the patrol ship had cut through her airlock without asking, and relief had turned into something more complicated. She looked at the 6 beings standing in her command room. They were Venari mostly, tall, gray-skinned with wide-set black eyes, and the careful posture of people who had been trained to appear calm. They were carrying weapons, but the weapons were holstered. The one in front had spoken to her in English, which meant they had either prepared for this or they had a translator running. Either way, they were more organized than she had expected. She also noticed, because she was someone who noticed things, that one of them had already moved toward the navigation console. "Please step away from that console," she said. The one near the console stepped back. The one in front, tail she would learn later looked at her with an expression that she had come to recognize as the universal face of someone who had been told something they did not understand. "Commander," he said carefully, "you are injured. Your ship has sustained significant damage. You have been broadcasting a distress signal for—" "I know how long I've been broadcasting," she said. "I set up the beacon myself." A pause. "You said it yourself?" "Yes." "You deliberately broadcast a distress signal?" "Yes." Tail looked at the others, a very brief look, but she caught it. She had been in enough rooms with enough people to know what that look meant. It meant this person may be confused. Handle carefully. She didn't have the energy to explain right now. And it didn't matter. What mattered was the Wraith who were still out there, who were still following the trail she had laid for them, who would arrive in the system in the next 6 to 12 hours and find what she needed to know. What they would find. "Where is the UNSC fleet?" she asked. Tail blinked. "I'm sorry, the United Nations Space Command, our fleet, the ships that were supposed to be waiting in this system. Where are they?" Another pause, a longer one. "Commander, there is no UNSC fleet in the Valerius system. There are no human ships here except yours." She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she opened them again. "All right," she said. She stood up from the chair, which hurt more than she expected, and moved to the secondary console on the left side of the room, the one that was still partially functional. She pulled up the navigation display. The Valeria system bloomed in faint green lines around her, the star at the center, the 4 planets in their orbits, the asteroid belt between the second and third planets, and at the edge of the display, a cluster of small red dots moving slowly inward. She turned the display so Tail could see it. "Those are Wraith ships," she said. 8 of them, maybe 10 by now. They have been following me for 6 days. This was supposed to be an ambush point. I come in damaged. They follow me in. They find a UNSC fleet waiting for them." She looked at him steadily. "The fleet is not here, so now I have 8 to 10 Wraith warships heading into your space, and no way to stop them except this ship, which currently has functional weapons on exactly one side." The red dots moved with the slow, patient certainty of something that did not know it should be worried. "Why," he said slowly, "did the UNSC not inform the Council of this operation?" "Above my pay grade," Yeva said. "I was told the Council had been briefed." She could see from his face that the Council had not been briefed. She filed this away as something to be very angry about. Later, when she had more time, "We need to contact the High Arbiter," Tail said. "Yes," Yeva agreed. "And while you're doing that, I need a doctor, a new power cell for the port weapons array, and about 400 G of anything with caffeine in it." Tail opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. "You are asking for weapons repairs." "I'm asking for a power cell. The weapons are already there." He stared at her. She looked back at him with the flat, patient expression of someone who had been awake for 22 hours and had run out of the energy required to soften things. High Arbiter Solik received Tail's report 40 minutes later. He listened to the whole thing without speaking. When Tail finished, there was a long silence. She set the distress beacon herself. Solik said, "Yes, High Arbiter." As bait, "Yes, High Arbiter." "And she is currently asking us to Repair her weapons so she can fight the ships she lured into our territory. Yes, High Arbiter. Solik looked at the holographic display. On his desk, the enduring resolve rotated slowly in the image, damage and all, one dead engine pod pointing at him. Like an accusation. He had a feeling, sitting in his chair, in the warm, quiet room at the center of the council station, that something had gone very wrong, not with the human ship, not with the Wraith, but with the council's understanding of what they were dealing with. He just couldn't say exactly what it was. Yet the council's emergency session lasted 4 hours. It would have lasted longer, but Yeva Astrova sent a message halfway through, informing them that the Wraith advanced scouts had just crossed into the outer edge of the Valora system, and that she would appreciate a decision in the next 30 minutes, or the question would become academic. The High Council chamber was a vast, circular room with tiered seats arranged around a central floor, built to hold the representatives of 47 species. At the moment, only 9 were present. The emergency representatives who could be reached at short notice, and they were all talking at once. High Orbiter Solok stood at the center and waited. He was good at waiting. He had been doing this job for 30 years. He had learned that the most useful thing a person in his position could do, when everyone around them was shouting, was to say nothing and let the shouting run out of fuel. It took about 12 minutes. The core question, he said when the room was quiet enough to hear him, is not whether the humans should have told us about this operation. They should have, they did not. That is a problem for the diplomatic teams to deal with later. He looked around the room. The question right now is what we do. About 8 to 10 Vreth warships moving through our space toward our station. We have 3 patrol vessels in the system, said Representative Gav of the Shen, a broad-shouldered species from the cooler planets of the Outer Rim. Our nearest combat fleet is 6 hours away. The Vreth will reach the station in approximately 4 hours, said Coordinator Voss. Then we call the fleet in and we hold, said Gav. We cannot hold with patrol vessels against 10 Vreth warships for 6 hours, said someone else. Then we call Earth, said another voice. We demand they send support. Earth is 42 light-years away, said Foss. Very patiently. Even at maximum FTL, a fleet from Earth would take. There's 1 human ship already here, Solok said. The room got quiet in a different way. 1 damaged ship, said Gav, with a crew of how many? 1 confirmed, said Solok. The silence stretched. 1, said Gav. 1 human on a damaged warship against 10 Wraith. She asked for a power cell for her weapons array and a doctor, Solik said. She has the power cell. The doctor is on the way. He paused. She has not asked for anything else. He let that sit in the room for a moment. He had been in this business long enough to know that how people ask for help or did not ask told you more about them than almost anything else. Species that were afraid asked for everything. Species that were desperate asked loudly. Species that have been managing hard situations for a long time developed a different habit. They identified what they needed, asked for exactly that, and got to work. Commander Ostrova had identified a power cell and a doctor, not a fleet, not an escort, not even a guarantee of backup. A power cell and a doctor. I am going to make a decision, Solik said, that some of you will disagree with. We are going to give Commander Ostrova everything she asks for, and we are going to stay out of her way. Gav looked at him for a long moment. You trust her? I trust that she has been planning this for 6 days, and we have been planning for 30 minutes, Solik said. I trust that. She lured 8 Wraith warships across 30 light years on a damaged vessel with 1 working arm, and the Wraith do not know that yet. He looked at the star map on the wall of the chamber where the red dots of the Wraith ships crept inward like a slow tide. I trust that she is not afraid. Aboard the Enduring Resolve, Yeva was doing 3 things at once. She was watching the Wraith approach vectors on the navigation display, tracking their speed and formation with the steady focus of someone who had memorized every detail and was now for the details to match her predictions. She was also talking to the Council's engineering team who had delivered the power cell and were now watching with poorly concealed amazement as she routed it directly into the port weapons array, using a bypass that their own engineers later admitted they had never seen before. And she was eating a bowl of something warm and salty that the Council medic had brought her along with a splint for her arm because she had been 22 hours without food, and she was not going to go into a fight with low blood sugar on top of everything else. You are going to fight them yourself, said Tail. He had not left the ship. She was not sure why. She had not asked him to stay, but she had not asked him to go either, and he had stayed. I'm going to finish what I started, she said. There are 8 ships, possibly 10. 9, she said, glancing at the display. 1 dropped back about an hour ago. Probably a comms relay. She took another mouthful of the warm food. 9 is fine. Tail was quiet for a moment. How is 9 fine? Because they think I'm broken, she said simply. She looked at him. That's the whole point. They've been following a ship that looks like it barely survived something. They think they're going to coast in here and take a wreck. They're going to come in loose. They're not going to expect anything. And when they do, she said, I'll be right where they expect me to be. Drifting quiet, and then not. She finished the food, set the bowl aside, and turned back to the display. The Vreth ships were 20 minutes out now, and they were indeed coming in loose, spread formation, no tactical tightening. The kind of approach you made when you were coming to pick up something, not to fight something. Tail watched her move over the console, pulling up targeting systems, running calculations, rerouting power with small, precise movements. She did not look like someone facing 9 enemy ships. She looked like someone doing a task they had done many times and expected to do many times again. The High Arbiter wants to know, Tail said quietly, if you require assistance. She was quiet for a moment, and her eyes didn't leave the display. Tell the High Arbiter thank you, she said. Tell him to keep his patrol ships clear of my firing lines. Tell him this won't take long. She reached forward and switched off the distress beacon. Then she switched on the weapons. In the cold dark of the Valorous system, the Enduring Resolve stopped drifting. They came 17 hours after the fight. Solik was reviewing the damage reports from the battle. The Vreth ships had scattered badly, 3 of them destroyed, 4 disabled, 2 fleeing back the way they came. When Coordinator Faz entered his office with an expression that said something new had happened. The cargo hauler had what looked like retrofitted gun emplacements on its Upper hull, the kind of installation done quickly, without elegance but with clear purpose. The freight transport had torpedo tubes that had not been on the original design. Schematics, the hospital ship's medical markings, were genuine, but there were weapons, arrays on its secondary hull that most hospital ships did not have. They are civilians, said Gav, who had come to stand beside Solik. Or they were. They are not asking for docking clearance, Foz noted. They are not broadcasting any kind of arrival identification. They just appeared. They came for her, Solik said. He was sure of it. He did not know how. They had known to come. Some message sent before the distress beacon, some prior arrangement, some communication channel the council had not detected. But 17 ships, all of them visibly armed, all of them from different parts of human space, arriving 17 hours after Commander Ostrova's fight. They had come for her. Or rather, they had come to help her finish what she had started. He hailed them. The response came from the frigate. The officer on screen was a man with graying hair and the tired, careful eyes of someone who had been awake for most of the day. He introduced himself as Captain Aldrich. Sen UNSC 7th Auxiliary Response. High Arbiter, he said, with a nod that was polite but not exactly deferent. We received a signal from Commander Ostrova 41 hours ago. We came as fast as we could. A signal, Solik said. What kind of signal? A standard mission update. She told us the trap had been sprung, that the rendezvous fleet had missed the window, and that she was proceeding with the plan. He paused. Proceeding alone, she meant. She fought 9 Vreth warships alone. Solik said. Yes, Sen did not look surprised. He did not look horrified. He looked like a man who had expected this outcome while hoping for a different one. We didn't think she could take all of them. We thought we'd arrive to help clean up. It seems we weren't needed for that part. What are these ships, Captain? Your fleet includes a hospital ship, a cargo hauler, a mining tender. Seni glanced off screen for a moment. 7th Auxiliary isn't a standard fleet, High Arbiter. We're a volunteer response group. When Ostrova's signal went out, these were the ships that could get here in time. He said it simply, without pride or apology. A real fleet would have taken 4 days. We took 17 hours. Solik looked at the 17 shapes on the scanner. He thought about the cargo hauler with its welded-on gun mounts. He thought about the retired colonial transport brought back from wherever retired ships went, crewed by people who had decided this was worth doing. Why, he asked. He meant it genuinely. Why come at all if the fight was over? Seni looked at him steadily. Because she was still in your space, High Arbiter, and she hadn't checked out yet. Solik let that sit for a moment. He thought about what it would take to assemble 17 ships in 17 hours. Not a government order. There had not been time for a government order, not a military command. The 7th Auxiliary was not a military unit. This was people, individual people, looking at a signal from one of their own and deciding to go. Some of them had come in ships that were barely weapons platforms, in ships that had been retired, in ships designed to carry ore or medicine or food. They had brought what they had. They had come anyway. I would like to speak to Commander Ostrova, Solik said. She's sleeping. Seni said. She asked not to be disturbed unless the breath came back. Of course she is, Solik said quietly. He closed the channel and stood for a moment looking at the 17 shapes on the screen. The hospital ship drifted slowly. At the back of the group, white and calm. Among the scarred and modified hulls of the others, Gov came to stand beside him. The Big Shen representative was quiet. For a long time. They are not afraid of us, Gov said at last. No, Solik agreed. They are not trying to impress us. No, they just came, Solik said. He thought about the council's long history of managing relations between species, the careful diplomacy, the status games, the endless negotiations about who had the bigger fleet and who had the older civilization and who had the right to speak first in a room. He thought about how much of that history was built on the assumption that everyone was trying to look strong. And he thought about Commander Ostrova, who had sat alone on a damaged ship in enemy space for 22 hours, and whose first question to the people who found her had been about who had authorized the breach of her airlock. She had not been trying to look strong. She had simply been doing a job. Tell the 7th Auxiliary they are welcome in Valorous, he said. Give them docking clearance, make sure Commander Ostrova has a proper medical team when she wakes up, and after that, Faz asked. Solik looked at the 17 ships one more time. After that, he said slowly, I think we need to have a very different kind of conversation with Earth than the ones we have been having. Yevgenia Ostrova woke up in a hospital bed that was slightly too wide and slightly too soft, in a room with pale green walls and a window that looked out on the docking ring of the Valorous Council station. For a moment she just lay there, letting her brain catch up with her body. Her arm was in a proper cast now, not the field splint. The bruise on her face felt less angry. Someone had cleaned her up and put her in a medical gown, which she regarded with mild suspicion. She looked out the window. 17 ships were docked in the ring, or anchored on short tethers nearby. She could see the angular silhouette of the 7th Auxiliary's frigate, and beside it the familiar bulk of the old colonial transport, and beyond that the white hull of the hospital ship catching the pale light of the Valorous star. They had come. She had not been sure they would make it in time. She had sent the signal because that was what you did. You sent the signal, you updated your people, you told them what was happening, and you let them decide. She had not sent it as a cry for help. She had sent it because Aldrich Sen was a good officer and he deserved to know the situation, and because if she did not come back, someone needed to know where the Wraith had gone. But they had come, 17 ships from wherever they had been, in 17 hours. She sat up, found a glass of water on the bedside table, drank half of it and reached for her boots. The meeting was held in the council's main conference room 3 hours later. It was a large room, formal in the way that rooms built for important conversations are formal. High ceilings, a long table, seats for more people than were currently using them. High Arbiter Solik sat at one end. Yeva sat at the other, her arm in its cast. Resting on the table, a cup of actual coffee in front of her that someone had sourced from the 7th Auxiliaries galley. Several other council representatives were present. Captain Sen sat to Yeva's left. Tail was there too, she noticed, sitting quietly along the wall, not at the table. Solik opened the meeting. Commander Ostrova, he said, Council has some questions. I imagine so, she said. Let us begin with the simplest one. Why did the UNSC not inform the Council of this operation? She looked at him steadily. I was told you had been briefed, I now. No, that was incorrect. I have filed a formal complaint with the UNSC Command Review Board. I am sorry for the confusion and for the position it put your people in. Solik nodded slowly. Accepted. Now the operation itself. You used your ship as bait to lure a Vreth pirate fleet into Council space. Without asking our permission, without warning us, you drew a battle into our territory and fought it with a single damaged vessel. Yes. And you did not think to wait for assistance. Yevgenia considered her words. She was not a diplomat. She was a UNSC officer who had been doing hard things in difficult places for 15 years. And she had learned that the most honest answer was usually the one that caused the least confusion in the long run. The Vreth had been hitting our colonies for 3 years, she said. Small ships, cargo runs, families moving between stations. We had filed the reports. We had requested Council assistance with the outer border. We had asked for the patrols to be extended. She met Solik's gaze. The Council said it was outside the jurisdiction of the formal patrol zone and recommended we pursue diplomatic channels with Vreth intermediaries. The Vreth do not have diplomatic intermediaries. They have ships and weapons. She paused, so we handled it. The room was quiet. The recklessness of the approach began. One of the other representatives, narrow-faced being Yevgenia, did not recognize. 3 years, she said. She said it without heat, without anger, just as a fact. 3 years. We were tired of waiting. Another silence. Solik looked at her for a long moment, then he looked at Sen. Captain, you assembled 17 ships in 17 hours from across human space. 16 hours and 40 minutes, Sen said. How? Sen glanced at Yevgenia, then back at Solik. Commander Ostrova sent a mission update signal. Word spread. People came. People came, Solik repeated. People who had friends on the colony ships they Vreth had hit, Sensei simply. People who knew someone who lost cargo. Or a ship or more than cargo. He did not elaborate, and he did not need to. It wasn't an order. No one told them to come, they just came. Solik was quiet. For a long time after that, he looked at the window at the far end of the room, where the docking ring was just visible, with its 17 ships still anchored in the pale light. He thought about what the Council had missed, not just the operation, the bigger thing, the thing that the operation pointed to like a finger, pointing at the moon. He had been thinking about humanity for years as a young species, energetic, short-lived, still learning how the galaxy worked, prone to rushing into things, not yet mature enough for full Council membership in the opinion of most senior representatives. He had been wrong, not about their youth. They were young objectively by any measure, but youth was not the same as immaturity, and rushing was not the same as recklessness. Humanity did not wait for permission, not because they didn't respect the rules, but because they had long experience with what happened to people who waited for help that was never quite going to arrive in time. They had developed a different habit. See the problem, build the solution, do the work, ask forgiveness, not permission, and even then not always. And when one of their own sent a signal, not even a distress signal, just an Update just to hear is what is happening. 17 ships came in 17 hours. Not a government response, not a military order, people with cargo. Haulers and their hospital ships in. Their decommissioned transports armed. With whatever they could bolt on in a hurry. Commander Ostrova, Solik said at last. I would like to ask you something that is not an official council question. I would like to ask it as one person. Asking another. Yeva looked at him. Go ahead. Were you afraid during the fight? Alone on that ship with 9 Vreth warships coming in. She thought about it, he appreciated. That she actually thought about it. Rather than just answering, yes, she said, but not of losing. I was afraid of running out of time before the job was done. He nodded, he believed her. The formal council vote on human membership was held 6 weeks later. It was not unanimous. It rarely was with 47 species involved, but it passed with a larger majority than anyone had expected. The debate, which had been running in various forms for over a decade, was shorter than usual. Tail, who had remained on the enduring resolve for the full duration of the Vreth standoff and had written a detailed report on everything he had seen, delivered the final statement. Favor. He was not the most senior person to speak, he was not the most eloquent, but he had been in that command room, and he had watched Ostrova's hands on the console, and he had seen the look on her face when the 7th Auxiliary ships appeared on the scanner. She had not looked relieved, he said. She had looked satisfied, the way a person looks when a plan that was always supposed to work does in fact work. After the vote, Yeva was sitting in the station's small observation lounge, watching the ships in the docking ring when Solik found her. He sat down in the seat beside her, without asking, which she appreciated. The council voted yes, he said. I heard, do you have any thoughts on it? She looked at the ships outside. The enduring resolve had been repaired. The council's engineering team had done good work, and it looked almost like new from here, the damage scored from its hull. The dead engine pod replaced. I think, she said slowly, that you will find us useful. I think you will also find us frustrating. I think there will be more situations like this one where we have already started something by the time you hear about it. She looked at him, but I also think that when you call, we will come in whatever we have in 16 hours and 40 minutes or faster. Solik looked out at the ships. The hospital ship was still there, white and calm. The old colonial transport had its running lights on, small and warm in the dark. I believe you, he said. And the galaxy slowly, quietly began to understand what it had been looking at all along.